What is happening out there, Roto Scouts basketball fans? Happy Friday, gang. You made it. Welcome to the end of your week. Some of you probably still tuning in, office, commute, bus, train, etc. Some of you probably at home. Some of you maybe don't work at all. But I appreciate you from wherever you are joining in, hanging out for a little bit to go through what is a very interesting NBA DFS slate for Friday. 10 gamer on DraftKings, 12 gamer on FanDuel, a little bit different. DraftKings dropping the last two games as usual. But really interesting news already has come out very early in the day, which is fortunate. We're probably going to get a boatload of news in the next couple of minutes. I actually hate starting shows at 4:30. I always try and go 4:15 at least, so that we don't immediately start with a bunch of changes that render this entire board irrelevant. But hopefully that won't happen immediately. Maybe that'll wait till 5:30. We'll see. There is definitely news that we're waiting on. But the biggest piece, the biggest domino already fell, and that is that Nikola Jokic is going to be out tonight. Birth of a child is imminent, and he is out for personal reasons. Definitely directing some attention into the Nuggets. But right now I've got it just kind of as a three-way time split. Because they've got Zeke Naji, they've got DeAndre Jordan, and they've got Dario Saric. And I don't love that situation right now. What I do think it creates, though, is just a flatter slate without having that, gigantic pay-up item. We'll see how the Sims came up. I just reran Sims, so this is going to be new Sim data. But we will definitely have some interesting results from that, and then a lot of other ins and outs. And we're going to get through all of them. Let me say hi to everybody. Cujo's here. First one in the door as always. Appreciate you, buddy. Hope your Friday's going well, too. Andy's here. Happy Friday back at you. Mamba, Stephen Leibowitz, Kenneth Woodhouse. Andy. Said Andy already. Good to see you guys. More people will be trickling in the next few minutes as we just kind of gradually make our way into the show. I know we are starting a little bit later, so I do, enjoy everybody who chooses to hang out with us instead of at other places ahead of lock. Always appreciated. How'd everybody's week go? Mamba, sounds like Mamba had a decent night. Tied for 5th, still trying to get first place for the Chat Roto Scouts giveaway. Hey, look, if somebody puts one, if you use the logo, take my logo and put it as your avatar, the little Roto Scouts guy in the corner there, and you put one in first place in a sizable tournament, I'll carve you out something. This isn't going to be like a everybody gets it every time kind of a thing, but like here and there, if you want to message me, and especially right now, if you're winning stuff, if you've got good screenshots, message me or send them out into the world and at me on them. And, I'll kick, I don't know if it'll be a full month or I'll kick you a week at least, just to keep things going. But yeah, I'm happy to, definitely make things like that happen for people who do well and help spread the word. Because really, that's how this site grows, right? There's so much we can do through social media. Especially, I actually just jumped on Blue Sky. For anybody who's on Blue Sky, at Roto Scouts is the handle, and then with the whatever .bksy. I don't think you need that part. So just at Roto Scouts over there again. Not moved off of Twitter yet. Might fully move off of it. We'll see. Right now, I'm just trying to play both sides, and there's not a lot of content going on Blue Sky right now, but a lot of people are jumping on. So I kind of figured it was a good spot for me to land on, where I could maybe carve out a little niche. So make sure to check that out. The Twitter handle's at Roto Scouts. Again, that's not really going away. I'll at least still be sending links out there. What I'm probably not going to be doing is using my Digital B21, the personal handle, all that much, just because it's death and I want to get out of that loop. I decided I was going to, back in September, I was like, all right, I'm getting sucked in a little bit here with everything going on. I'll give it through last Tuesday, and then I'm going to try and extract myself, and that is kind of the plan. But for this stuff, the links will still go out on both. Do you guys use Facebook? Is Facebook still a thing? I'm trying to figure out good angles where I could spend a few minutes a day, just dropping links and stuff. And my sister was saying you're so much of your demographic is on Facebook, and she's not wrong, but I don't know how good Facebook is for that anymore these days. I know they're also tied in with Threads. Anyway, we'll get into basketball now. This is not the social media show. But check out all those different things. Stephen Leibowitz, I know you're on Blue Sky. I saw your thing the other day. I'll see you there, buddy. But, yeah, let's get into this slate. Let me pull up Vegas. We'll talk about the most current Vegas lines. Again, 10 games on DraftKings, excluding the 2 10 o'clock games, 12 games on FanDuel. Ooh, it looks like some of these are currently off the board. All right. Let me do it from what I had put in. All right. Detroit at Toronto. Toronto favored by 2-point dogs at home. 224.5 point total in that one. Just kind of an are who they are spot as far as the upside in that game. Toronto still missing several pieces. Detroit has Jaden Ivey at last look was questionable. That could be an interesting domino if he doesn't go. And then Fontecchio is doubtful today. He's not projected in. That's kind of accounted for. Timmy Hardaway, same thing. So there could be some value emerging from Detroit, and then we'll take what we get in the mid-range from the Sims. Miami and Indy. Indy favored by 4.5 in a home game, 228-point total. Another solid mid-range game there. Jimmy Butler out again. That, as we talked about last time they went, and Hero had the gigantic game, I'm once again kind of giving more of it to, not directly to Bam Adebayo. And it looks like he's getting super popular again. So we'll have some Bam, but I expect we're going to see Bam kind of below the field again. I didn't run away with the Tyler Hero projection. I think it could be a little bit higher than I have it, and I might give it a little bit of a kick at around lock, but I don't give Bam quite the bump that I think other places are. And that worked out the last time out. Nothing necessarily predictive about that, but I think we're in the correct range with him. So that's an interesting spot. We'll look where he landed. The Sixers and the Magic, a really, really low end game, 209-point total. Magic favored by 2.5 at home. The top-end guys from the Magic, the usable parts you can always get to. There's still maybe some value to be squeezed in the front court there, but prices have largely normalized for everybody in their current role, so I don't know that we really get crazy about that spot, but we'll give them a look. The Nets and the Knicks, another one that's just kind of falling as an are they are spot. Knicks favored by 9.5 in a home game in the Garden. 216-point total in that game. Just kind of meh. Karl Anthony Towns, I suspect, will get some of. I'll be curious where Jalen Brunson comes up. There are some injury issues to deal with still with the Knicks. So we'll give that a talk through. Karl Anthony Towns is one of those. If he doesn't play, then we could get some silly values in the Knicks front court. We could also see, just some of those guys play 40-plus minutes as usual. But right now, that just kind of looks like an okay game. Lakers and the Spurs is currently off the board. Earlier, it was Lakers favored by 3 in San Antonio, 228-point total. AD, LeBron always going to be playable when they're on the court. Wemby always a target for a monster upside game, and he's had a few already this season. One of the best point per minute performers in the entire league. So always at least worth considering. And then we'll see where the mid-range types landed from San Antonio, the Chris Pauls and so on of the world. Stephon Castle was looking pretty good earlier in the day. Not sure if his value has slipped with the changes that have gone on, but we'll see how he ends up landing. Wizards and the Hawks. Hawks favored by 9.5 in a home game, 241.5 point total. Monster total on the board there. That's a spot for Atlanta. I feel like we'll probably see some Trey. I'm very confident we'll see some Jalen Johnson. I'm not sure what we'll see of some of the downboard guys, even the ones who have been good, just because of some price normalization with that team as well. On the Wiz, I'm not sure how much we really come up with. It's a really nice total, so I wouldn't mind having some of the Wizard side of it, but it's probably going to be a take what we get situation. Bulls and the Cavs is not currently on the board, but that one earlier was at 237.5, so another juicy total. Cavs favored by 10 in a potential wipeout situation, though. The Bulls, not all that good. The Cavs are pretty damn good. So definitely pieces. The Cavs are going to look about like they normally do, with Mobley being playable, Allen being playable, Garland, Mitchell, everybody kind of kicking in their usual value. It'll probably be in the 8 to 12% range for like any or all of those guys. And then Chicago, maybe we'll see a little bit of Levine, a couple shares of the the Giddies of the world. But with everybody there, that's not really going to stand out that much. Solid total, though. Again, like the Wizards, I wouldn't mind a couple of Bulls if they get there. Lakers and the Spurs I did on the other board. So did I this is in a different order. Nuggets and the Pellies. Nuggets are still favored by 3. 218-point total. Just for perspective, that's down 2 points and 1 point closer than it was earlier in the day. Not sure if that line was done also with thinking that Jokic would probably be out. He was just questionable when I originally put that in. That news broke right when I was handling that game. It was nice. So that one is definitely going to be interesting to see what they do with the big men. It's also very interesting to explore some of the production. We'll talk about it in a minute when we get to some of those players. But just in a broad sense, it's not a direct situation where everybody just automatically improves because of rate or whatever with Jokic out. He's such a big piece of everything that they do, including facilitating other people's buckets, that realistically, most of the people go down. Jamal Murray goes down. He's also been down in his action so far this season. So if people get excited and run away with Jamal Murray shares, I'm not totally crazy about that. We'll see where he comes up in the sim, but I think I'm going to be a little bit behind where some other places probably will have him. And that's true for multiple guys there. I expect we'll see some of them. I'm sure that we'll see a little bit of Peyton Watson, because he's just cheap. Probably mostly on DraftKings. It might be on the screen in front of you guys right now. He's also projected through the roof. It looks like Jamal Murray's drawing a pretty big projection as well as far as ownership goes. And he could definitely get there. It's not a situation where he's not going to have the opportunity to go out there and do all the scoring for this team. But he hasn't, again, over the last 2 years, he's been diminished by comparison to his average rate by it's 1.21 over last year on a FanDuel scale, and it dips to 1.17 with no Jokic on the court over the last 2 seasons. Porter's in the mix there for some shares. A guy that I think is going to be really interesting, just on the idea that they need some raw scoring potential outside of the big men. I gave a few additional minutes to Russ here and a little bit of additional uptick. I think he's going to get really popular. I might have him a little bit behind some other places still, even with the uptick. That's another one that I don't want to get totally crazy about because it's still this version of Russ. But I think around a 30 fantasy point day would be a reasonable projection. I've got him at like 28. But that's going to be a really interesting one. The Pelly side, they're just missing all their guys still. They're not all that intriguing. Maybe we see some Ingram pop in. The Clippers and the Rockets. Rockets favored by 5 in a home game. 215-point total there. Kind of a meh game. There's really not a ton of upside in that game outside of just you can always get some Şengün, you can have some Harden, so on and so forth. Phoenix, this one's off the board right now too. Phoenix and OKC. OKC was favored by 7.5. Durant and Beal still out for Phoenix. Makes Booker look pretty good. Tough defensive matchup, obviously. 227.5 point total is pretty appealing. we'll probably see some of the big usual pieces on the OKC side come through as well. Grayson Allen is questionable for Phoenix, and Nurk is questionable again. We saw Plumlee step up for some minutes the other day. That would presumably be the same situation for Phoenix if Nurk doesn't go, so just one to watch there. But interesting pieces, at least, in one of the later games. And then the last two games of the slates are a really, really ugly and honestly entirely skippable in my mind, outside of maybe a couple of big names at the top that are obvious. Memphis and Golden State. 236 point total. That's the problem. It is appealing for that point total. Golden State favored by 7.5. But the way both of those teams are running minutes, and with Memphis having several guys questionable, and they could get a lot more interesting if those guys scratch and just don't play. But they've got several guys that are questionable right now that would be big impacts on what they're currently doing, and it makes them really difficult to forecast what that rotation, what those minutes are going to look like. And then Golden State's just been low end on minutes. They've been spreading minutes out like crazy. So like maybe Steph at the top of the board from the Golden State side getting some reliable minutes and with his monster upside. And then maybe Triple J from Memphis. Maybe, I don't even know. We'll see if anybody landed in the sim. But I'm really, really not overly happy about that game as far as just figuring out where minutes are going to go right now. And then the last one of the night, I think, is at least appealing for the star caliber players that we have to work with. Minnesota and Sacramento. It's also a 1.5 point spread and a 222.5 point total. It's the closest point spread on the board. And with all those quality players in the game, it's definitely interesting. We've got a big ownership number on Kevin Huerter because DeMar DeRozan's not going to play. He's currently doubtful, but for all intents and purposes, he's out. So makes some of the top end guys from Sacto look pretty good, makes Huerter look pretty good. It's going to be an interesting game at the end of the night. So I like having that one on the FanDuel slate. I do not like having that Memphis Golden State one. Good luck to you too, Ant. Heading out. Anthony Taylor's just wishing everybody luck. So to get us through some of these situations. So Tyler Hero's available. Haywood Highsmith is available. Nikola Jovic is available. Do not get those names confused. That would be a big mistake. Jokic is out. Jovic is available. Dorian Finney-Smith, Jalen Brunson, Jarrett Allen, Anthony Davis, and Kyle Anderson are all probable. Your questionables, Jaden Ivey, kind of a key one. Andre Drummond, less so, but we create a little bit of an interesting void of minutes if he doesn't go. Deuce McBride, same thing. Karl Anthony Towns, much, much bigger potential impact for the Knicks. Evan Mobley's questionable. Rui Hachimura, Vlatko Konkar, Steven Adams, Grayson Allen, Yusuf Nurkic, Desmond Bane, Brandon Clark, and Vince Williams Jr. all questionable. All three of those players went through shoot-around. Right now they're projected in, but with just kind of mixed minutes because no real idea what that's going to look like with them coming back. But since they went through shoot-around, it does kind of seem like they're going to go. We'll see what we get, but again, hate that game in general. And then outs, Simone Fontecchio and Timmy Hardaway are both doubtful. Ajer Thompson is out. Scotty Barnes, Bruce Brown, Kelly O, Emmanuel Quickly, Jacoby Walter, Jimmy Butler, Isaiah Jackson, Andrew Nemhard, Aaron Neesmith, James Wiseman, Tyrese Maxey, Paolo Banchero, Wendell Carter Jr., Bojan Bogdanovic, Nick Claxton, Daron Sharp, Trenton Watford, Precious Achua, Mitch Robinson, Lonzo Ball, Sam Merrill, Max Drews, Christian Wood, Jared Vanderbilt, Jalen Hood-Schifino, Jackson Hayes, Trey Jones, Jeremy Sohan, Sadiq Bey, Malcolm Brogdon, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Vic Krejci, Cody Zeller, Aaron Gordon, Nikola Jokic, Jose Alvarado, Jordan Hawkins, Herb Jones, CJ McCollum, DeJounte Murray, Zion Williamson, Kawhi Leonard, Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, Alex Caruso, Isaiah Hartenstein, Chet Holmgren, Jalen Kawhi Williams, Gigi Jackson, Ja Morant, Cam Spencer, DeAnthony Melton is a piece for Golden State that's going to be missing. Devin Carter, Malik Monk, and DeMar DeRozan is doubtful. So half the NBA is out. And that's as of the 3:30. We'll see what changes in the next couple of minutes. We'll see if we got any news coming down right now. Probably do. Saturday. Thanks so much for all the Saturday reporting. Underdog, if you're out there, stop doing that. Nobody cares about Saturday right now. Mama says hit that like button and you will win today. I like that thought. Mamba says LeBron should be immortalized after today as the greatest human being in the history of Earth. I don't know about that. I'm a big fan of LeBron's. He's quite the basketball player, I'll give him that much. So let's dig into some of these positions. With different slates, again, we are sorted by the DraftKings rate, but that puts these FanDuel outlier games at the very top of the board. And then we'll cut it by FanDuel positioning so that we get everybody. But here's where your slate starts on DK with a big name. Remember, I did say that I would expect that we were going to see some Peyton Watson. We got a big chunk of them on FanDuel, and we got a massive chunk of Peyton Watson on the DraftKings slate. That is a lot across our top 150 lineups, but several pieces from Denver look like they've emerged pretty strong. Jamal is one of them, so that's including the putting him at the rate that I think is appropriate. So that's going to be interesting. Christian Brown's getting there. Russ is getting there a little bit. So going to be an interesting slate to run through. Start with the guards. Any questions? Drop them into the chat. Shout things out. A. Dean's asking, what do you have for Zeke Naji? Sites projecting him for 15 minutes. Why? Because it's DeAndre Jordan and Dario Saric are also there. So there's just no clarity right now on, is it a direct three-way chop? Is it going to be a significant chunk of minutes for one of those guys, not the other one? Najee, my original, like I said, when I got to that game, as I was going game by game to do the rotations, and then I go and revise rates and projections and everything. When I got to that game, I originally was like, all right, Najee, it was Jokic landed on the out list right then. And I was like, all right, Najee gets this, and I gave him 20 plus. Jordan gets that, and then as I was thinking it through, I noticed Saric was there, and he was just getting some coach speak yesterday or the day before about like, yeah, Dario hasn't really gotten any action, but he's a great teammate, and I was telling him we're going to get him out there, and it's a long season, blah 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 blah, blah. And lo and behold, this opportunity the next day or 2 days later is here. So presumably that was with the knowledge that Jokic was going to be out. And because it's not an injury for Jokic. His wife is about to give birth. So they kind of knew what the situation was, and he was talking about that with the media. So I would expect at least some minutes for Saric. So right now I've just got it basically as a three-way chop. So, Adine, isn't it just whoever starts we play? Yeah, maybe. But I mean, we could start here. Like right now, Najee didn't come up. Jordan didn't come up. And Saric didn't come up because I've just got it chopped like that. And then I've got a couple additional minutes just spread through other guys. Like I said, I gave Russ a couple additional minutes thinking they'll go small. Watson picked up like 2 minutes. He went from 32 to 34. But right now, it's just that chop. And with that, nobody really actually looks good. If you get DeAndre Jordan in the starting lineup, if you get Zeke Naji in the starting lineup or Dario Saric, but each guy only plays like 16 minutes, you're dealing with some limited upside. So it's really a big question mark. I'm hoping that we get some sort of buzz, some sort of directionality out of props or something, right? To help us out a little bit with that one. But it's an ugly spot. And I kind of agree, Brian. Brian Kuzorian jumping in saying, it feels like a big stay away situation. With the three big men, I kind of agree. And we've got plenty of other spots to go for bigs. I'd rather use center, honestly, on a lot of situations, on a better overall player. If we get clarity on minutes around a Zeke Naji, let's say, then completely changes the situation. If I had to guess, if it, gun to my head, stuffed into a cannon, ready to be shot out of the cannon into the ocean, which guy is it going to be that would get 20 plus minutes? I would say Naji, but it wouldn't be a comfortable decision. So right now I'm leaving it as it is. If we get clarity, you'll see the projections change and just follow the projections. If somebody jumps up several points over where they are currently, That should be a big indicator that that would be your guy. I am also, again, within Denver. I think Watson is easy, secure. You just go to it. He's already been decent. He already gets minutes. Should see plenty of opportunity to succeed for the cheap pricing. 57 power forward only on FanDuel. Perfectly functional. We got him 60% of the time and way ahead of the field. On DraftKings, we got him 90% of the time because he's only 4,600. That's a gigantic price difference across sites. Last time out, he played nearly 40 minutes, put up 26.5 on the FanDuel scale. That's behind his 0.81 per minute for this season, just eyeballing it. But 0.81 is perfectly fine on 15.1% usage, 16% usage last year. Got a little bit of, let me get the solid 17 point, wrong line. Really not putting up any assist or rebounding numbers, just kind of an empty line so far. Jamal is the one, as I was saying before, just gets kind of interesting. 1.21, 1.22 player last year. Down to 0.88 so far this season. So a little concern there to begin with. And like I was saying, that 1-2-1, 1-2-2, in situations over the last 2 years without Jokic, it's been 1-1-7. That's not a gigantic difference, but it doesn't actually trend in the direction that would suggest that you should get more Jamal Murray today. We got him 47% of the time and level with the field on DraftKings. And that's with the field and the field's ownership getting there more than we probably should be as far as like what that projection would be. So I expect this 47% is truly level with the field or maybe below the field. I think we should be a little bit under on Murray today. It's a great opportunity. Again, it's a pushover opponent. There's no reason to think that he shouldn't succeed. But I think there's enough reason to think that maybe we don't get to runaway freight train shares of him. So 40-45, perfectly fine on DraftKings. I'm happy with the 21 on FanDuel. He's only 71. He does have multi-guard spot eligibility on DraftKings, so it makes him a little bit more valuable over there. But I do think that's a spot to maybe just watch your exposure against the field. Christian Braun, 41% is a little bit more than I was expecting. He's a 0.83 per minute player basically across the board. Same usage at 15%. There are more than enough minutes there. Remember, there's no Aaron Gordon here either. So, I mean, Peyton Watson, Christian Braun, going to have plenty to do. It's just what kind of quality do we get over those 35 or so minutes? What is our ceiling? What does our upside truly look like? And is he not just kind of appropriately priced already at 53, 6,000, even for the uptick? So, again, 41%, I'd be comfy at 35. I'd be comfy, even a little below that. I think he's one to keep around the field, maybe a little bit below. We got him just 12% of the time and like dead even with the field on the FanDuel slate. I'm happy with that. Russ, again, I did give a little bit more. We got him less than the field on FanDuel and just 5%. We got him a pretty hard undercut to the field on DraftKings as well, but we did get him 20% of the time over there. It's been 113 per minute for the season. I do think he's going to be playing in like a reserve role, but I do think there's going to be a little bit of uptick. I had him at 20 minutes. Last time out, he played almost exactly 20, put up almost exactly 20. And I had him going back to that range, but then I moved him up thinking, again, just, they're going to need to find scoring somewhere. So I think they do go small for at least a little bit of this game. And then the rest of it's just a total mess. MPJ just kind of looking like who he is and didn't really come up at appropriate pricing. And then these other guys just with that mix of minutes I really don't love. So that's the Denver breakdown. Let's get back to the position by position. AD saying, I'm playing 30% Saric, most expensive of the three, and swapping to whoever starts. I mean, if you want to attack the situation and specifically make sure that you have some of whoever's playing center, then yeah, that's the way to go about it because it makes swapping easy. I don't know that I love that overall position, though, as far as like the DFS position against the slate. But we'll see. That game's what? 9 o'clock, or 8 o'clock rather. So we should at least have some information to work with on those swaps. So getting back to the positional stuff. All right. It's only a couple outliers up at the top, but one of them, two of them, three of them are quite big, actually. That's a couple big spots at the end of the night on FanDuel. So the Kevin Huerter one is obviously huge. No DeRozan. I've got him at 34 minutes. Not my favorite player to go to in the world. He's an average usage guy. He's just okay in general. 58.7% true shooting so far in 26.9 minutes a night over his 10 games. 12.6% assist rate, 6.8% rebounder. A lot of the time lives and dies with the shot falling. Maybe picks up a few assists, maybe gets his hands on the ball a little bit, but right now, just in a price and opportunity-based situation, shooting guard and small forward eligible on the FanDuel slate, we're getting him 62% of the time. Again, he's one of the most highly owned players. I think it was over 40%, but we are comfortably above the field on Huerter, and I don't think it could look much better. I think it is a truly good late-night go-to spot from the mid-range where you can book a lot of shares, and then you'll have some spots to move around. You've also got Keon Ellis showing up a little bit, 29%. He's 4,100, basically in the same situation. So both of those guys, just mid-range value pieces. If Keon Ellis was a absolute crush spot at 41, he would have come up a little bit more than this. I'm happy to be a little above the field. 25, 30% I think is fine. We're talking about a 0.71 per minute player on 11% usage so far this year, 0.81 on 12% last year. So I don't think we get too crazy about it. But I think the opportunity is there to book some cheap shares of him and utilize him as a value lever late. And then from the big group of guards, De'Aaron Fox, 35% of the time and a little bit above the field at 8,500. Another guy who, even with some underperformance so far this year, should benefit from the opportunity tonight. 28.2% usage, down from 30%. You would think he claws that back a little bit with no DeRozan taking his mid-range jumpers. So I do like the opportunity for Fox. I'm sure we'll see some bonus. Steph Curry at just 6.67%. Probably pushing out a lot of the opportunity for the other guards from Golden State then and any of the other pieces. If Steph only came up that much with everybody else projected in the 20s minutes-wise, I wouldn't really expect much of the other guys, but we'll see what we get. Otherwise, nobody. Scottie Pippen maybe hits the board if things change for a couple more minutes in Memphis. Des Bane not really hitting from Memphis, and I don't really expect more than like the 26 minutes that I've got him with right now. Marcus Smart, 24 minutes not really hitting. None of the other guys. Vince Williams, I only threw a couple token minutes to right now. So again, that Memphis and Golden State game, just outside of the big name guys, I'm not sure how much there is to love in that game. Grayson Allen, currently questionable, but I've got him projected in. In 26 minutes, he looks like a piece on both sites. He's only 3,700 on the DraftKings slate. He's a 0.78 per minute player over there. But at that price, if you get the right Grayson Allen day, it doesn't have to be like a big scoring day. He's a player who can get his hands on the ball a little bit. So I don't mind that 56% of the time. I don't love Grayson Allen overall, but that's a very cheap square with shooting guard and small forward eligibility. And we're gently above the field. If you want to pull that back toward the 50% or toward the field's number, I think you're fine in doing that. But it does suggest there's a little bit of at least value-based advantage in getting shares of him because it's going to help you reach some of these other squares. On FanDuel, 25%, again, gently above the field. That's the range I'd rather see Grayson Allen in a lot of cases, just as far as like the raw number. But it's a better opportunity on DraftKings, so it makes a lot of sense that we're getting him over there. But definitely looks like a piece on both sides, assuming he plays. Again, Murray, I'm concerned about what the actual output looks like. If the field's getting crazy about him, I'm happy to at least explore other options. He's got excellent upside. But you can see the difference in what he's done this season. I mean, the usage has been way down for one thing. The 0.88 has come on just 22.6% usage. He was a 1.22 player on 27% last year. So presumably, if he jumps from there to there, he should be around that. But again, over the last 2 years with no Jokic, it's been more like 117, which is not a gigantic difference if you add it all up, but the .05 across 35 minutes, it starts to become a critical couple of points. And that would be the difference between where I've got him and the 39 or whatever points on the FanDuel scale, the 41, 42 points that other people probably do. Christian Brown, again, 12%, 41% on DraftKings. Different play across sites for the value. We talked about him enough already, though. Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey both coming up a little bit. We got more Jaden on the FanDuel slate at 33%. We got more Cade on the DraftKings slate at 34% over there. Level with the field on both guys on DK. $9,300 for Cade is a fair price. We got him 35%, and then $6,500 both guard spots for Jaden Ivey, who is a decent enough player, 0.98 per minute on the DraftKings scale so far this season. For that price, there's reasonable enough production if he plays. Remember, he's questionable today. On FanDuel, the 6,300 across both guard spots seems to be working really, really well for him. 95 for Cade, point guard only, not so much. That's an interesting difference across sites for the Cade Cunningham shares. It's just a 200 price bump against the different positioning in cap, but we're getting a lot more on DraftKings. We talked about Russ already. Tyrese looks fine. It's actually more than I expected to get of him. 22% on FanDuel. He's only 8,100. That's probably why. 8,000 on DraftKings. Point guard only on DraftKings. He's got point guard and shooting guard on FanDuel, so that's more of why we got to him. Basically level with the field there. He's been at 1.04 per minute for this season. Was a much more productive player last year. I'll remind myself where I have him. So I've got him basically halfway in between. He was 1.04 per minute last year. So far this year. On a little bit of a usage haircut. True shooting's just at 50.7%. The assist rate is great at 35.9. Just needs some more shots to fall, really. And he'll be back to, at least approaching the previous production. So for this one, I've got him, the previous was 1.38. I've got him at 1.20. I think that's a fair split for how this goes. I don't love this game overall, like we talked about. I have them losing a possession and change compared to their average. It is a 228.5 point total, or 228 point total, though, and a relatively close point spread. So there's enough upside there. And again, we did get him 22% at 8,100 there, 18%, a little bit below the field, but you could level that up if you wanted to. Donovan Mitchell, just 0.67% on FanDuel for 8,700. He's an $8,200 play. I would love to have that on DraftKings. 16% and level with the field. Honestly, if you want to take a few additional shares of Donovan Mitchell, he's got that true star caliber scoring upside where he could just go out and, rip a new one into Chicago and just put this thing away. He's already a 5.32 value score. He's at a decent projection. He's been a 1.26 per minute player so far this season. If the field's at 16 and you wanted to kick him up above 20, but, keep it below 25, I would say, I think that's a reasonable position to go take. Ben Mathurin, a little bit below the field, 14% on DraftKings for 62. Shooting guard and small forward eligible. 66 for the same positioning on FanDuel. We got less of them relatively, but a little bit closer to the field. 6% of them over here, but closer to the field than we are at 14% over there. Mikal Bridges, much bigger piece on the DraftKings slate for 58. He didn't land at all on FanDuel at 64. He, so far, has not been all that good. 0.78 per minute, down from 0.94 last year. Significantly less usage with the Knicks than he was free to take shots more with Brooklyn. But they also haven't really been falling. His numbers have been kind of down. But you still got to like the upside for him to normalize at least to maybe a reduction from last year, but not quite as dramatically. I just don't know that it happens immediately today. So 64 on FanDuel doesn't really work. 58 shooting guard and small forward. We do get him 13% of the time, but that is below the field. Same thing with a couple other good players, Zach LaVine and Cam Thomas, both at 11.3%, both at or below the field. On FanDuel, neither guy came up. One share of each, 73 and 7,400. It's just very different prices for those three players across sites. So those three guys stand out as you compare DraftKings to FanDuel. It's kind of a swap with the guys that you don't have on the DraftKings slate that we're getting up there. James Harden, 4.6% under the field on FanDuel, 10%, a little bit below the field on DraftKings. Harden's still a player that I would be fine getting a little bit more of. He's been at 1.38 per minute on DraftKings, 1.33. That's up 0.2 of a fantasy point over what he was doing last year. The usage is way, way up at 29.8% compared to the 20.2%. It's just free to take shots, create all the offense he can for this team right now. But another one where it's kind of a grindy spot against Houston. I don't love that matchup on either side. We did get 10% of them on DraftKings. We also got in the same game on the other side. We got 10% of Freddie VanVleet over there. Both guys a little bit below the field, though. Freddie's a different price proposition, 6,600. He actually lands as a moderately okay value, 5.06 value score. Again, we're looking for 5.5 here, but that's not bad. I think both guys playable, more so over here. Mix and match caliber over on FanDuel. Tyler Hero, so again, in 42-3 the other day, he put up 69 FanDuel points. Pretty monstrous game. I thought I remember that being in the 70s. Wasn't it? Either way, tons of opportunity for Hero to lead the way again. So far for the season, he's been at 1.17 on FanDuel, 1.26 on DraftKings. The significant upside, the price is at 75, 78 across sites, so he's a little bit more valuable on FanDuel, where we got to him a little bit more, but so did the field. 8% of them on DraftKings. On either side, I think he's a fair guy from the mid-range to grab a few additional shares of. You don't typically go nuts for guys in the the mid 7,000s when they're just kind of showing who they are value, but I think there is that additional ceiling of opportunity for another game like he had the other day. It's not showing necessarily through the sim, but given that the field's not getting carried away with Tyler Hero for what is still a fair price over here, I do think you could easily double that exposure, 16 or so percent, be a little above the field. I don't think I'd take it to like 25. But that's a moderately okay opportunity over there. And over here, you probably could go to 25 if you want to gain a little bit more ground against the field. I do think Hero's an interesting enough play today. And he's been overperforming his previous rates. That'll probably normalize as time goes on, but there's the opportunity for him to carry out, more advanced production tonight. Chris Dunn, maybe a value square. We got him a little bit over on FanDuel, 14% of the time, basically level with the field at 4,700. He's 4,400, both guard spots on DraftKings. We only got him 7% of the time, and a little bit below the field. Might just be getting chewed up by probably a lot of that. The Grayson Allen, big chunk at 3,700. And then, maybe just losing shares too. There's a little bit of money to spend, I guess, that's going to these guys. With that low price, I'm kind of surprised that it's 519 value score is not bad either. I'm surprised we're not at least like over 10. I think that'd be fine. He stepped into the starting lineup, Terrence Mann to the bench the other day. That's the assumption that we're going to see that again. But he's a low usage player, 12% overall for this season, 13.2 last year. He did put up a 0.94 per minute mark on the low usage last year, so he can be productive, but don't necessarily know that production translates when he steps into the starting lineup with guys like James Harden. So in the game the other day, did end up putting up 32.8 in 30.6, so it did work out that time. But there is a lot of basement on that play as far as just reverting back to low usage, low production, or low usage, moderate production. Jalen Noel played nearly 26 minutes the other night, put up a clunker at 18.7. He was a value play that started to cool as the evening wore on and just did not get there in any way, shape, or form. 0.70 per minute last year, 0.75 on a usage increase so far this year. He's a minor play on DraftKings, 6% under the field. I see no reason to get carried away with Jalen Noel here. Jalen Suggs, 13% FanDuel, 5% DraftKings, mix and match piece, level with the fields. That's a capable mid-range player. But again, that Philly-Orlando game is 209 point total. So it's just a rough game environment to really extract a ton of value out of. But Suggs was one of the guys I mentioned, the guys from the top of Orlando you can definitely consider. So 13% feels about right on FanDuel. 5% on DraftKings. If you want to kick that up to 10, you're not, no huge mistake. At 3,200, it looks like we got a little bit of AJ Mitchell with some minutes on from OKC. 5%, but below the field. Another mix and match value guy. If you see that projection jump for any reason, then you would definitely want to have more at that cheap price. 33 minutes on Garland, just kind of is who he is spot. Didn't get him on FanDuel, or one share of him on FanDuel, 4% and below the field on DraftKings. He's still just 71 on the DK slate, point guard only. Looks like the field's getting there a little bit, but that's probably only 12%, something like that, 3x what we're at. I don't mind a little more Garland, but I would keep him below the field probably. 1.22 per minute for the season, though. I mean, he is a good player, and that is a fair price. LeVert, just a mix and match play across sites. Davion Mitchell coming up a little bit. 28% on the FanDuel slate, 3% and hard undercut to the field. He's 51 on DraftKings. Does have both guard spots, but on FanDuel, he's just 45. Point guard only. So that's a very, very different play. Another guy that I don't tend to get too excited about, but he is definitely landing as just a price and minutes proposition. 0.65 per minute last year, 0.78 on a minor half a point of additional usage so far this year. There's just opportunity for him, for Grady Dick, who's a few spots further down the board. I think Grady Dick's the better player between the two, but he's also at a higher price. Since the field is like right at that 28% or thereabouts, I wouldn't mind, as long as I'm getting to, reasonable value pivots. I wouldn't mind taking a few shares away from 28 and having more like, 20 on that play, just because he is a very low per minute player a lot of the time. And you do have, again, value options. You've got, not that Noel showed up much, but you've got him cheaper. He's point guard only. You've got an even cheaper Mitchell, but he didn't show up at all on FanDuel. You've got not a lot of direct pivots in that price range, I guess. Well, Chris Dunn, if you can get the 47, is not a terrible consideration to pivot. Only 200 more. And then you do have the guys up here. 41 Keon Ellis with point guard eligibility. Probably slides into a few of those shares if I make that decision to get a little less Davion Mitchell. Not that we're not already getting Keon Ellis, but he came up as a much better value. So just some interesting pivot points at the guard spot, though. Trey didn't really land on FanDuel. 3% of them over there, 2% of them on DraftKings. Pretty hard undercut to the field on the DraftKings slate. It's not like he's under projected. Nearly a 50-point projection on DK. He's been a 1.33 per minute player so far for the season. Plenty of opportunity for him to go out and do his Trey kind of things against Washington. It's just, I don't know what the ceiling looks like, and he definitely doesn't look like he compares to the other top-end players all that much. He does have the ceiling, I guess, of a player that you could take a few additional shares of, but we'd be talking about kicking it up maybe to 10% at most. Not a significant investment in Trey. Lou Dort, all those guys from OKC, just kind of mix and match pieces. Everybody in the 1Z, 2Z range over here. You do have some good players, though. Kobe White, 72-67 across sites. Didn't land all that much. $4,800 Ben Simmons. Didn't really land that much on DraftKings. Couple shares of each of those guys, but undercuts to the field. Same thing, couple shares of each of Trey and Malik Beasley. Shea, interesting difference across sites. 10-7 on DraftKings. We got one share of him in our top 150. He is absolutely on the list of players that you could say, all right, I'm going to take a few more shares of SGA. That ceiling is ludicrous on any given night. 1.50 per minute for the season. DraftKings 151 per minute. One of the true 30-plus in all situations usage players on the slate. Does a lot of other things on the basketball court. 10-8 on FanDuel. We got him significantly. 17% level with the field. If you want to up that to 20-25, I don't think it's a mistake spot. And a few other cross-site outliers. 17% of Terry Rozier. Another player from Miami who would directly benefit in this situation. The other night, put up a clunker, 39.5 minutes. He put up 19.9 FanDuel points. He's a better player than that. 0.81 per minute this year, 1.06 last year. I would expect him more in the 0.85 to 0.95 kind of a range. I don't think we're getting above 1, but he's got that ability still. And he's cheap, 5,700, solid mid-range option. But again, did come up a little bit below the field on FanDuel and basically not at all on DraftKings. Grady Dick, 13% FanDuel, not at all on DraftKings. He's 63 on DK. Shooting guard and small forward eligible. Same positioning on FanDuel for 500 less against the FanDuel cap. We got a bigger chunk, 13%, but again, below the field. Booker, I love seeing this spot late on this board. We didn't get him at all on DraftKings, but if you want to grab a few shares just to have some Devin Booker in your pocket, definitely can do. But he's 97 over there. He still has the ability to pay that off, especially no Durant, no Beal, potentially no a couple other guys, no Nurk, no Grayson Allen. So at 97, a few shares in your pocket is fine. At 88 on FanDuel, shooting guard and small forward eligibility, he looks pretty terrific. 15% in our top 150. That's above the field. I would not mind pushing that above 20% on a player that good, even with OKC's defense, even with OKC's just general quality. In the situation, getting to more Devin Booker there looks pretty appealing. For the season, he's down a little bit, 1.12 versus 1.23 last year. Put up 32-1 in 31.4 minutes the other day, but has spiked a couple upside spots already and more than capable of doing that in a game that he's going to be the most interesting piece of. Paul George, just 6%. No real appeal for me. 6% of Agbaji, 3% of Trey Murphy. Nobody significant down this way. Power says, what a weekend. Tyson versus Jake Paul and John Jones versus Miocic. Is that an MMA match? I am not a MMA guy. I do like boxing. I just have been kind of off boxing for a while just because it's been so shitty. But I'm definitely going to watch this fight, the Paul Tyson fight. Andy says Tyson smashes. I think Mike's going to have to crack him in the jaw pretty early. The longer that fight goes, the more it dramatically favors Jake Paul. I am not ruling Mike Tyson out, though. I know he's old. I am unwilling to take Mike Tyson off the board. It's a one-punch situation, right? It's not an endurance fight. He cracked him with that slap yesterday. Yeah, if I'm thinking Mike at all, I'm looking for that fight to be no more than 2 rounds long, and I'm looking for Mike to get him in the first round, honestly. I think that's where, if you're betting Tyson, that's where you're looking. Tyson won't knock him out. The Paul brothers keep those contracts strong. Only difference is Tyson may say F that contract. Yeah, I mean, there's, Mike on this side of lock versus Mike after lock. Once you hit Mike in the face, as the famous saying goes, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, odds are it's just an exhibition. We see Mike do what he can for 2 rounds. We see Paul carry him for the rest of the fight. Nobody gets hurt. Nobody gets too beat up. And they just, move around the ring and tie each other up a little bit for a couple of rounds. Odds are it's not much of a fight. But like you suggest in there, it's Mike. Never going to take him off the board. He's like 20 years older now than George Foreman was when he had his famous comeback back in the 90s. Or 15, maybe. Definitely going to be fun to watch, at least. I know I wouldn't want to fight him. Maybe if you're, somebody like Gundacker's size, you'd watch those training videos, you'd be like, that slow up man, I could take him. I would not get into a ring with Mike Tyson, even at that age. I also know that I couldn't outrun him, even at that age. I guarantee you that Mike Tyson could catch me in a foot race. And yes, I realize that he's like a 60-year-old man. That's right, Andy. We got to catch up with Gunn. I know I keep saying that. I haven't talked to him forever. All right, let's get into some of these forwards. I did the sort already, right? Yep. So a couple outlier guys. It actually doesn't look like we got too much Sabonis on FanDuel. So more of the late game went into the guard shares. Kevin Huerter being one of those guys who got 62%. He's got forward eligibility. We did get Wiggins. Wow. That I'm surprised by. He's only 5,500, so it makes sense. He is at the second highest minutes projection among the Golden State Warriors. At 29 minutes for 6,000, we didn't get any of Draymond, really, 2%. But 25% of Wiggins, it's entirely price-based. Good enough player at that price, honestly. That's perfectly fine. I didn't realize he was quite so cheap when I was saying I wouldn't expect anybody other than Steph. Makes sense that we would get him. We are a little below the field. 25% feels about right. 1.02 per minute for the season on 20.9%. But on the exact same usage last year, he was at 0.87. So, small sample. Had one big performance early in the season that weighted that a little bit. Last time out, 25.6 FanDuel points in 33.7 minutes. That is a normalized game for Andrew Wiggins. So maybe we temper expectations a little bit, but price-based upside for sure in one of the 2 late games on FanDuel. Anthony Edwards and Domantas Sabonis and Jaren Jackson as well. If you want to grab additional shares of any one of those 3 guys, I think it's perfectly fine. Between where we're at here, where it's already, make sure that you have at least some. Between here and 15% on any one of those guys, what I wouldn't do probably is get overweight to like all 3 of those guys, because then you're just putting a big basket of shares at the end of the night on plays that don't necessarily come up great against the slate. It could turn out to be an okay position. Those are 3 spectacular players. You've also got Randall there. Not a bad option at 74. We got him 2% of the time, level with the field. 1.01 per minute this season, but does have upside toward that 1.17, and can pick up points through happenstance or opportunities. So I never mind having some Julius Randle. He's appropriately priced for what he is right now, but I'm also okay having just 2% being around the field there. Otherwise, we got none of like Keegan Murray, Jonathan Kuminga, Santi Aldama, Nas, Devo. Any of those guys, onesie, twosie shares is fine, but none of those guys came up at all significantly. All right, so Peyton Watson. 39.7 minutes the other night, put up 26.5 FanDuel points. He's a 0.81 per minute player. We talked about him already when we broke Denver down just individually as a team, just looking at the impact from no Jokic. So the minutes were already going to be there in the absence of Aaron Gordon, and now just with more for everybody to do, I just think it's a additionally enhanced opportunity. He comes up great as a value piece on both sides. At 57, power forward only, we got him 60% of the time on FanDuel. He was a 0.88 per minute player last season. He's 0.81 so far this season in his 10 games, his 23 minutes a night. But there's enhanced opportunity to get above that production. I've got him below a point per minute, but trending slightly above. Let's see, is it above that 0.88? I think I had him 0.9. Yeah, 0.9 exactly. So I am perfectly fine having a big chunk of him. If you want to knock it down to 50, that's fine, but be above the field. If you want to knock it down to on DraftKings instead of 90, you kick that down to the 70s, the 60s, wherever your comfort zone is for being above the field on a play. Perfectly fine to take him there. But right now, he looks like a potentially major advantage spot against the field. 46 power forward only, very, very cheap on DraftKings for the potential upside. Even if he has an average game at 4,600, you're probably not hurting yourself by putting Peyton Watson in that spot. So nothing but upside there. Grayson Allen, again, if he goes, we talked about him in the guard spot, but does look like a piece on DraftKings. Less so on FanDuel, but coming up on both sides right now. We'll see what happens. Christian Brown, we talked about him during the Denver breakdown. 12% level with the field on FanDuel. Been a .83 player, basically is who he is kind of a season, but another guy who should benefit from additional opportunity there. We got him 41% of the time on DraftKings. He's been a .83 per minute player over there, but he only costs 5,300 shooting guard and small forward. So a lot of upside for Christian Brown on the DraftKings slate. Moderate upside for him at price on FanDuel, but additional ceiling there for sure created by that opportunity. So take him to 15, even taking him to 20 if the field's at 12 or thereabouts. If you wanted to go off the path a little bit, build a fort on a hill, that's not a bad option to do it because the minutes should be there and the opportunity should be there. Anthony Davis, just 4% of them on FanDuel, but we did get a lot of them on DraftKings. 10-5 over there versus the 11,000 on FanDuel. He lacks power forward eligibility on the DraftKings slate. That usually helps him out on FanDuel, but didn't get a ton of them tonight. Slightly below the field at 4%, but on DraftKings, 19% level with the field. AD's got monster ceiling on any given slate. Be interesting as far as rebounding opportunities with the big guys colliding here. Wemby is on this page. He's all the way down there. You can see what the output looks like, though. 156 for Wemby so far this season. 155 for AD. $600 price difference in the wrong direction, though. On FanDuel, it's an $800 price difference. We got literally no shares of Wemby. To completely clarify, you can absolutely take shares of Victor Wembanyama on any slate. I don't care who his opponent is. I don't care if he's got one hand tied behind his back. He's ridiculous. He's got this upside on any given slate, and he's got upside for another 20 fantasy points beyond that. This was just a very good Victor Wembanyama game. That wasn't even an excellent game. So, ludicrous upside on any given slate, including this one. You can definitely take him. Honestly, if you want 10% of them here, even though we didn't get them, it's not completely crazy. Could just go out and have slate breaking upside on any given slate. Is this the ideal spot to do it with his price all the way up there and all the way up here? No, not at all. That's what the math and the sims are telling you. But again, as I pointed out to somebody the other day, that's why they play the games. The math gets us so far, the predictive values, the game environments, and so on and so forth get us so far. And then Victor Wembanyama and his ludicrous ceiling take over. So having a few shares in your pocket is always fine. We got monster Jalen Johnson shares on FanDuel. Approaching 60% of him, way above the field. So a lot of these lineups at probably power forward are going to be Peyton Watson, Jalen Johnson combo. I bet most of that falls at power forward. But you do have the two position eligibility on Jalen Johnson, which only enhances the value. He's been at 1.18 per minute this season, looking pretty terrific. 119 on DraftKings. For 8,900 on DraftKings, we only got him 11% of the time. A little undercut to the field, but we do still have him. 13% each of Mikal Bridges, who we talked about already, and Tari Eason. Eason a little bit below the field. There's value there, 5,000. That's not a bad price for a 1.18 per minute player. I mean, look at the price difference between these two players. And look at the output difference so far. Is Tari Eason Jalen Johnson? No. But he doesn't have to be at that price. And he does have the output so far this season. couple of big performances in there padded that. In 26 minutes the other night, he put up 39.5 FanDuel points. So for the money, I think you could probably grab a few additional shares of that. We got him a little below the field. I have him. For one, I have them losing a little bit possession-wise in that game. And then he is at... Yeah, I've got him closer to previous season's production. If you wanted to give him a little nudge upward, you could. It's not completely crazy to give him another, let's say, take away that modifier. Give him if you wanted to move him into like the 28, 29 point range, probably okay. That's more like what he's been doing so far this season. So I think there's at worst a little bit of additional upside potential at that price for Tari Eason. At 6,200 on FanDuel, it's dramatically less. Don't really see much need to get to him at that price. That's a huge price difference. $1,200 across sides. Zach LaVine, like I said before with the Bulls, we got him 11%, but below the field on DraftKings. Didn't really get him on FanDuel. He put up 54-4 in a good performance the other day. If he can continue to hit that kind of a pace, we're obviously going to change our tune about Zach LaVine in a hurry. But last year he was 0.94 per minute. So far this year, 1.03. On DraftKings, he's 1.10. A little bit more output there. 6,800 shooting guard, small forward. That's why we get him a little bit more over here. But it's kind of a mid-board type piece. Tobias, 20% below the field on FanDuel, 11% and a harder undercut on DraftKings. 0.91 per minute on the DK slate, 0.93 on FanDuel. Was a better player with a little bit more to do before arriving in Detroit this year. But definitely has, solid mid-priced veteran upside. Averaging 34 minutes. I've got him at 35 tonight with a few players banged up for Detroit. I could see him slightly overperforming where we're at and getting to paying off field value on either site. If you get him up to 15 or so on DraftKings, it's probably fine. I'd probably hover 20% or maybe down toward 15% on FanDuel. 6,600 over there. He's not quite the value that he is over here. 493 versus the 526. Again, looking for 5 here, looking for 5.5 there. I don't love the Tobias spot, but I believe enough in it that it's not crazy to think that you could succeed with it. Pascal Siakam, just 6% FanDuel, 7% DraftKings, is who he is kind of a situation. Jarrett Allen, same thing. Good player, 12.6% over here, level with the field, 6%, little under over there. No issues with a few additional and taking him up to 10. Patty Williams, around a point per minute the other day, but overall for the last two seasons, or last season and for part of this season, 0.76, 0.78. You get the occasional spike in upside. He's just fairly priced for that. 5,500 on FanDuel, power forward only. We didn't get him. Got him 6% of the time on DraftKings where he's only 44, but he's limited to power forward only, which cuts his upside down a little bit by comparison to other similarly priced guys. So I think it's reasonable to have him in that 5-6% range. OG, just that usual Knicks minutes upside. But those guys are all basically level off the price where they ought to be. So we didn't really see much OG. I haven't seen Josh Hart. There's Josh Hart down here. Didn't really get him on either site. If the opportunity changes, if Deuce doesn't play, if Karl Anthony Towns doesn't play, there's definitely upside for increased minutes, increased opportunity for all of the Knicks. And all of the Knicks means 8 guys. So you'll see it come through very, very clearly in your exposures and what the projections look like if that situation changes. But right now, just kind of a mess spot. Onesie twosies on DraftKings for everybody here. Again, including Wemby, but feel free to take more. 3% of Mobley, kind of just crunched with Allen there, with everybody on the court for Cleveland right now. They're great. Really good basketball team. For DFS tonight, everybody's just kind of priced for them being what they are. So nobody's really popping, but we're getting a little bit of everybody. And like I said before, taking additional shares of most particularly Donovan Mitchell, I think is a decent idea. Mobley loosely qualifies for that, for 7,800, for 8,100. He is one of the better performers at the upper mid-range price at power forward or center on both sides. So having him around this level, sub 10%, anywhere between 0 and 10%, I think dealer's choice is perfectly fine in that range. Beasley, touched on before, but again, another guy benefiting in Detroit right now, just from a little bit of an opening in opportunity. Ryan Dunn, 3,900, small forward only from Phoenix, right now at 27 minutes, but still with some question marks lingering about what's going to be there for Phoenix tonight. At that price, could pay off that opportunity. 0.78 per minute so far, 15.2% usage. Put up 24-1 in 27 and change minutes the other day. That's right where I've got him projected minutes-wise, and I've got him projected under that range as far as his output goes. Right at 5.5 on the nose, though, as far as the FanDuel value number goes. 15% level with the field on the current situation. That's one to watch as we get into the slate for a potential value pivot late if things open up even more in Phoenix. So probably only upward trajectory for that Ryan Dunn value play. Not a bad one to book on FanDuel. At 4,000 on DraftKings, does not appear to have come up very much, which is kind of interesting. 2% over there. Could also be enhanced over here, though, if things change. So keep them in mind for DK2. Don't rule them out. Jalen Williams, just 10% and a hard undercut to the field on FanDuel. One of the bigger undercuts we've seen so far. Just 1%. Again, hard undercut to the field on him on DraftKings as well at 83. Michael Porter, we're way below the field. Well, not way below. We're at 0 and the field's at like 2 or 5. We're below the field at 1% on DraftKings. Reasonable expectation for, again, everybody in Denver with more to do with missing bodies and a couple of significant players. Michael Porter could easily succeed at these prices. He's been a 0.96 per minute player on DraftKings, 0.94 per minute on FanDuel. Should see a usage and opportunity spike here. Talented enough to pay it off, but not really popping against the field. And this is with those things taken into account. Nobody else really looking that appealing. We talked about Grady Dick already. He looks interesting on FanDuel. We talked about Booker, who is super interesting on FanDuel. Paul George, mentioned him before. No real love. Trey Murphy, same thing. Just mix and match shares of all those guys. Let's jump over to the center spot. So for differentiated guys, just 6% of Sabonis. Again, you can take more of that. Jaren Jackson, same thing. Didn't really get any Draymond. And none of the other guys from the late night games. We did end up coming up with a big piece of Bam, which is interesting because, again, I didn't really tweak that all that much. So 7,900, he's coming up like a major piece of the FanDuel slate. 60% level with the field. It makes sense. I mean, just because it's not necessarily directly giving him the advantage from Jimmy being out, he does have it, and would be the biggest player in that lineup, both in a physical sense and a fantasy point scoring sense. So I'm not unhappy to see those shares of Bam. I just kind of wasn't expecting it to be quite that runaway, especially with the field getting there pretty dramatically. 30% slightly below the field on DraftKings at 82. I think that makes a little bit more sense. That kind of jibes with my expectations more than the FanDuel number does. But he's cheaper on FanDuel, much better value score on the FanDuel scale, so I get it. Jalen Duren, much better piece on DraftKings for 59 than he is at 61 on FanDuel. Center only on both sites. He's been a 1.07 player on both. Definitely for the price, you're getting a fair amount of them, 22% level with the field. We are nicely just level with the field on all those options, though. That's interesting that all 5 of those guys came up basically level, a little bit of an undercut to Bam. But you got AD there, you get Joe Val at 5,000, and you get Şengün at 82. All of those guys in like the upper mid-teens to 20%. So for me, that gives me a nice range of swappability at a variety of prices between those center plays for different types of lineup builds. And then what I would specifically look to do is like, all right, let's say I went out and I'm hand building and I built an AD lineup. Then I would immediately say, all right, what happens to that AD lineup? Let's say he's the most popular in that group. We're at 19. Let's say the field's 25. I wouldn't go up to the Bam spot in ownership for the price discount, but for the same price at 82 down here with Şengün, who came up half as much as Bam did, but at a more gentle like level or maybe slightly above the field, I would say, hey, all right, what does that pivot buy me at another position? And I would try and divert that lineup to like a strong but differentiated position, if that makes sense. So I think there's a lot to work with right there. That does not exist on FanDuel today. Really interesting. And obviously with the util spot, you can get a couple of those guys if you want it. I would qualify Cat into that same group. He came up a little bit more of an undercut to the field. And then the same thing, honestly, with Miles Turner, who came up at a little bit more of an undercut to the field, but still 10% of each of those guys. So if you're moving that group around, you could throw them into that mix, make it 7 deep. You could do that with Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley as well. Mobley gains the power forward eligibility, so he's even easier to move around as far as mixing and matching your way to those plays. Miles Turner came up a little bit on FanDuel, 9% of the time, 6% of Duren, 4% of AD, and then the 12% and 8% of Allen and Mobley that we already discussed, and then not much else. 10% of Jakob Poeltl. Always an interesting enough option. Pain in the ass as far as naming conventions go with changing the spelling, changing whether we include the umlauts over the O. Really annoying. But a decent enough play, 10% on FanDuel. We did not get him at all at 7,400 on DraftKings. Same price across sites, dramatically different impact. Don't know that you need to go fishing for shares. Nothing down the board really. Not even really, any big players or projections down there. Noah Clowney in a couple of additional minutes with Claxton out. No real uptick there. Not saying all that much. Yeah, just a few, onesie twosie shares of Vooch on DraftKings, not on FanDuel. Chris Boucher got there a little bit for just 4,200, just in an is who he is kind of a situation. Goga, who people are probably looking for at 5,300, 3%, a little bit below the field. If the field's sub 10, you can take him up to 10% and get a little bit of position there. Good enough per minute, easily, 114 per minute for the 5,300 with realistic expectation of 26 to 28 minutes. It's an ongoing position. As long as that price is still there, it's okay. On FanDuel, he's already 63 and didn't come up at all, and I'm fine with that. Yeah, really not much else. Power says, I like SGA, but if they put Ryan Dunn on him, temper your expectations. Rui is downgraded to doubtful, so that could open up things as Power points out around those 16, 18-minute mid-board types for LA. Jim Parrish looking for the CP3 night. Let me put the guards back on the board. I'll pull up Ace Mind as well in just a sec. We'll see what the lineups that are the backbone of some of these percentages look like. I said at the beginning of the show, too, and don't remember mentioning him as we went through, was Stefan Castle, who, didn't end up coming up. Not at all on DraftKings at 47, just 2% on FanDuel. Was looking more interesting early in the day. Again, we're just shy of that 5 that we're looking for as a value score on FanDuel. But I think just got chewed up by different changes that went through. Chris Paul didn't really come up. We got like one share of him on FanDuel. Didn't really come up at all at on DraftKings at 63. But we're really just not getting any of the Spurs right now. That game, again, was 228-point reasonable total. 3-point spread. I honestly don't have any issues with a couple of shares of Chris Paul. He's been a 1.08 per minute player on DraftKings this year, 1.05 on FanDuel. I would do it just looking at him as I'm just taking Chris Paul and it is who he is situation today for 63. I wish he was a little bit cheaper. If he was at like Devin Vassal's price, it would be a little bit more interesting. So without the math necessarily indicating it, it is a player who's going to have secure 28 minutes, has some very clear skills to rack up some fantasy points. I think he's somewhat directly tied because of his assist rate to the performance of a lot of the other players on this team. So keep that in mind. A lot of the time, taking position against the field doesn't necessarily benefit you with a player like that, where he has to extract his value from his teammates' success when he's got a lot of mediocre to shaky teammates. What I would say is a big Wemby day probably benefits Chris Paul pretty directly. But I think that's just okay. Playable in the sense that Chris Paul's always going to be at least a little bit playable, but not really popping. But again, if you get this game, 37 FanDuel points in 28 minutes the other day, that's killer for that price. So that's what I mean by saying that, it is, the talent is still there for what he does well. So it's not completely bananas. You're not picking Ousmane Dieng and asking that question. You're picking somebody with more reasonably realistic upside. Cue the Ousmane Dieng surprise 50-point day. Cat and Deuce are warming up. Wanted to be cleared. Yeah, this sounds like they'll both play. It's the Knicks. I always just expect them to go. Power saying Zeke Naji or DeAndre Jordan, whichever starts are the best values unless Sims starts if Cat's out. I think Cat plays, though. I do think Cat plays. I do not think that Zeke Naji and DeAndre Jordan are the best values on the slate, though. We talked about them at the beginning. Unless I get some kind of clarity on the three-way split of those minutes, I'm not going to get over the moon about any of it. Hopefully we just get, he's going to start expected to play 28 minutes for Zeke Naji. And then, yes, big-time value. Right now, and monitor the projections. That'll be the easiest way to tell. Right now, I've got that as a three-way chop where not one of those three guys looks great. So we will see. Let me pull up Ace Mind here, and then we'll punch out so that I can stay on top of these things. If you're out there, hit the like button. Hit the subscribe bell if you've never subscribed before. Make sure you check out rotoscouts.com. Access to all this stuff, all the projections. Football, basketball, hockey, baseball when it's live. Access to all of it. No per sport fees. All under $1 a day. All in pricing. Start with DraftKings as usual. So, many of the pieces that were in an exorbitant number of DraftKings lineups are right here at the top, like Peyton Watson. Big chunks of Jamal Murray. Some Christian Brown coming through. Some Russ, uncomfortably. You can kind of clearly see those centers that I was talking about, not only in the mix of names in the center spot as you go down, but look how many of these go center between those guys, back and forth. I realize that some that I'm pointing to don't, but a lot of them do. Cat and Joe Val, Jalen Duren and Joe Val, Bam and AD, Cat and Darius Garland, Joe Val and Şengün, Bam and AD, Bam and AD 3 times, 4 times. That seems like a decent combo. 5 times. 6, including that top one. So if I'm counting that correctly in that quick little scramble to count those, that was 6 out of the top 20 here have Bam and AD paired, center and util. Super interesting. So it does seem like going big is not only viable, but kind of recommended in our top performing lineups here. And then you've got a lot of Peyton Watson going through the power forward with some shares of Tobias jumping in, a couple of decent upside guys like Evan Mobley sliding in there, Jalen Johnson, but those are in lineups that more utilize like Jalen Duren, Miles Turner here, instead of those Bam AD lineups, which obviously makes sense. Those are taking more of the Peyton Watson play. Looks like we're mostly taking a mid-board / value guy / Denver guy in the forward spot. And then fairly spendy at point guard. That's like spendy / mid. We've got some Cade. We've got some Mitchell, Jaden Ivey, a little bit of Russ in there. So decent amount of money to spend at point. And not bad at shooting guard either, where we got some Jamal creeping into the mix. We get some Tyler Hero, which again, if you want to press the gas pedal on that one a little bit more, I think it's viable. Bridges surprisingly in the top performing lineup up there, but that's a swappable piece. If you don't like the Miles Bridges play, you can go elsewhere. Let's see how that trend continues. Really curious about this. More Bam and AD. More Bam and Şengün. Bam and AD. This one's Cat and Harden, but it's still spendy. Bam and Şengün. Bam and AD again. Bam and Koji. Bam and AD again. That is, to me, that Bam AD combo is kind of speaking to me as we're looking through these results. No promises, but seems like a good approach. And then again, I would definitely look to cash in that Watson value. Just look how much that name's in here. And obviously, we know from the percentage that we got that he's going to be there, but it makes all the sense in the world that there's value there. I'll scroll down through some of the bottom ones so you guys can just pick off some ideas. Again, not saying go play any of these lineups. That would not be within the terms of service, and that's not why we do this. We're just looking at how things come together and constructions that will inform your constructions and your lineup choices. I feel like that's a good statement to make to dance through any minefields of legality and terms of service. On FanDuel, looks like we're mostly meeting expectations. Ton of Bam in the center spot, like we were seeing. Yeah, it's just straightforward Bam. Looks like we're largely going decent spend mid-range. A lot of Peyton Watson obviously is going through the power forward, but we're getting a good number of Jalen Johnson shares in here. We're getting some Evan Mobley. Tobias is filling some of those roles. So maybe it's more Peyton Watson and a decent upper mid-range guy, or two like lower mid-range guys. Not that Pascal Siakam and Jalen Johnson are lower mid-range guys. That's actually fine. Siakam, Johnson, Bam as a three-man unit there. And then you get Ingram, who we didn't really talk much about, but will continue to benefit just from the missing bodies around him as far as like any given slate opportunity. This lineup does have Chris Paul in it. This is a FanDuel lineup, though. Darren Fox, Kevin Huerter, Keon Ellis. So we're taking a three-way out of that Sacto backcourt. I don't love having all three of those guys. It's perfectly fine. It more tingles the instinct from a few years ago to avoid those kinds of situations. We're beyond those things now to most degrees when we expect guys to get minutes, even if they're sharing opportunity. So I'm okay with it. But maybe if there was a Keon Ellis pivot, I would at least look at it. Getting a good amount of Tyrese, as we talked about. We're getting some Shea coming through the point guard spot. Does look like there's money to spend at the point in both spots. Some Harden and Cade, some Jamal and Steph, Tyrese and Jamal. You could take a value there, but there seems to be room to spend at both points. And then our Booker shares are probably going to bounce back and forth between shooting guard and small forward. And again, I would want more Booker than our mid-teens number. I would look to take him into the low 20s. And we have room to do that with, these Ingram shares are probably a pretty close replacement. Tyler Hero's coming up a little bit in the shooting guard spot. Kevin Huerter, again, is a big piece of value there. And then those surprise Wiggins shares are coming up a little bit in these top performers. Still a lot of changes to come. A lot of flexibility remaining on the slate, though. Hour and a half in, coming up on 6 o'clock. Let me get out of here. I'll catch up on updates. I'll update the projections up on the site over at rotoscouts.com real quick. Football main slate projections have been live since 4 o'clock this morning when I finished doing them. I'm going to get on the groups and stacks and optimizer and game notes column starting tonight, and that'll be finished off tomorrow as usual. Football show, somebody asked an hour ago. Football show will be live tomorrow afternoon. Going to try and land it during the day like we've done the last couple of weeks. Hopefully before NBA chaos. Hopefully I can work the day correctly. It's all down to my time management skills, which is never a good thing. But keep an eye out. That's why you got to subscribe so you see when we go live. Follow Twitter. More importantly, follow Blue Sky, at RotoScouts on Blue Sky, at RotoScouts on Twitter. Build those up if you get an opportunity. Like and repost, particularly again on Blue Sky, where we're trying to build up the new presence and dominate the DFS field on Blue Sky. Let's see what happens. Anyway, guys, you absolutely rock. Good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something. Have great weekends. We'll see you tomorrow to talk main slate football. Adios.